Interruptor 2020. En este momento vamos a dar inicio a nuestra cápsula de cooperación internacional, un habilitador para la innovación pública. Me acompaña Craig Kubalik, él es director y jefe del programa de cooperación internacional de desarrollo de Colombia en Canadá, donde lidera el enfoque del programa de innovación pública, además de trabajar con el sector privado en el desarrollo de varias iniciativas para atender a la población más vulnerable. Tiene una licenciatura en Derecho Internacional, Desarrollo Internacional, una maestría en Relaciones Internacionales y Finanzas en la Escuela de Asuntos Internacionales Norman Patterson y un certificado de Filantropía y Gestión sin fines de lucro en la Universidad de Texas en Austin. Craig, te doy la bienvenida, muchísimas gracias por acompañarnos en este espacio y te escuchamos.
Muchas gracias. Buenas tardes. Thank you so much for having me here today. It's really an honor, actually. In reflecting with my team on what innovation means for Canada, I was excited to know that we share the ambition to do things differently, to have more impact with Colombians. It's one of the things that unites us right now. And so to be with you today and to share a little bit of some reflections on what my country is doing within our own borders, but also some reflections on what Canada is doing abroad, including in partnership with Colombia through international cooperation, is really exciting. So I will. I think it's important to say from the beginning that the reason why we're here, Interrupter, public innovation, it's absolutely essential and necessary to address in a more impactful way the challenges that we're facing today as a world. This has been brought into even sharper relief with the pandemic, but how do we strive to be better in the way we operate to achieve more impact and more results? Canada's been working in cooperation with Colombia to reduce poverty and inequality for 40 years. And in the last couple of years, we've been working really closely with DNAP in advancing public innovation in Colombia. And so I guess as a consequence, we have a partner in this event in the sense that we've been working so closely together for the last couple of years. And I'm just really proud of the work that the National Planning Department is doing. I've seen very few other countries that are working this hard to make achievements in the area of public innovation. We'll go on to slide 3. So today I was hoping to speak relatively briefly about our own story and path as a country, that is Canada's, in public innovation, and then focus a little bit on the role of innovation in international assistance as Canada sees it. Then talk a little bit about the Colombia case, which is the program that I'm leading here in Colombia, and how we're doing development or international cooperation differently by living and breathing innovation, and then just offer some conclusions. If we go to the next slide. So that's my Prime Minister, and his government over the last 5 years, our government has made innovation a key feature of how we're governing. And it's really about closing the implementation gap through innovative outcomes-based approaches. And by implementation gap, I mean whatever we need to do based on the challenges at hand and the resources at our disposal to address in a more effective way the problems we need to tackle and achieve the impact we want to achieve. I've always defined innovation as having more impact with the same or less resources. So we really need to focus on impact. For our own government, in terms of its big policy objectives around innovation, we've came up with 4. First is to open up the problem-solving process to non-traditional stakeholders. This is difficult and it takes time, but we find it yields more results. Number 2, strategically use our national or our federal funding to incentivize better outcomes. It's all about incentives. Number 3, leverage untapped funding sources to maximize impact. And then finally, incorporate as much as possible emerging technologies and approaches into the functions of the public sector, such as artificial intelligence, into our core government operations, using data and evidence to drive our policy decisions rather than ideology, and also focusing on outcomes where we can increase the transparency and accountability for government investments. So the next slide has a video. I hope it works. Because this is a video about, it's just one innovative initiative that we're taking in Canada. It's called the Smart Cities Challenge. It was launched in a few years ago, and it offers a new way for the Government of Canada to help communities of really all sizes improve their lives through innovation, data, and technology. Got an audio problem here. Okay, I hope you can hear me right now. I think that every presentation has to include a video these days for it to qualify as a presentation. I'm not sure if that worked for you. It wasn't working on my screen, but I hope you got a sense of the Smart Cities Challenge, because it really is an interesting initiative that the Government of Canada is undertaking. As we move on to the next slide, we'll move on to some of the concepts and approaches that are being undertaken internationally around innovation. You know, in the case of Canada, we have a long way to go, and we've recognized that we have made many mistakes along the innovation journey. But we've set as a goal as a government to replicate and bring more innovation to the way we advance our international assistance. That is the contributions that Canada makes as a so-called donor in working with other countries to reduce poverty and inequality. Obviously, the global ambition to eradicate extreme poverty as outlined in Agenda 2030 or the Sustainable Development Goals are not going to succeed if we keep with the business as usual approaches. We need groundbreaking improvements to existing service delivery, ways of doing things, products, and policies if we're going to be successful. We also need new partnerships and funding modalities, including public-private cooperation, so that we can be more effective and have more impact, and scale up the solutions that we do develop. So just to quickly mention that right now Canada has what we call our Feminist International Assistance Policy. It's been around a few years. Our government undertook 300 consultations in over 65 of the countries where we work. And we use 9 high-level events in 5 Canadian cities to understand what Canadians wanted to do abroad. Over 15,000 people were engaged in these consultations, resulting in over 10,600 written contributions. So this was a really serious exercise. In and of itself, it was innovative. And what it concluded was that we need to put women and girls at the absolute center of what it is we're doing overseas. In terms of working with other countries to reduce poverty. By eliminating barriers to equality and helping to create better opportunities, women and girls can be powerful agents of change and improve their lives and those of their families. We identified this as the most powerful way we, Canada, as a country, could contribute to reducing poverty around the world. There are 6 different areas that we're focusing on up at the screen, on the screen right now. But the whole point is that we are working to ensure that women and girls are involved in the innovation process, are beneficiaries and innovators in their own right, that they're helping us to identify the problems and that we're involving them in designing, testing, and scaling up the solutions that we bring forward. Next slide. So for us as a government, our international assistance is implemented by the department that I work for, or the ministry. Es lo mismo que la Cancillería, and it's Global Affairs Canada. And so for us, innovation in international assistance is both a process, like how we do things, but it's also a mindset. And changing mindsets, we've found, is the most difficult thing that an organization can face. There are some key factors to consider when identifying development innovation. First of all, what is the specific problem? We often start with solutions, but we need to know what problem it is we're trying to solve. And then, is the solution truly locally driven, or is it a Canadian solution? It's not going to work if it's a Canadian solution. Is the solution new or improved in the local context? Does it have the potential to address a problem more efficiently or effectively than existing practices? And will the solution be tested, piloted, and scaled up? Next slide. So innovation in international assistance, it can be transformational. It can be an entirely new solution to a problem, or it can be incremental. It can be an improvement to an existing solution to make it more effective or efficient. But the innovation process is supported by a methodology that can include things like ideation, research and development, experimentation, testing, adjusting, adapting to the local context. All of these things can be what innovation is about. But I still come back to innovation being achieving more impact by doing things differently with the same or less resources. Next slide. I just wanted to make sure that everyone was aware that Canada made as its focus as the G7 host 2 years ago for the summit, we made innovation in international assistance one of the priorities. And the G7 governments in 2018 pledged to encourage innovative ideas and actions for sustainable development around the world. So there was a G7 commitment to work together to drive change in our own organizations and with our partners. This led to the next slide, which is about the Whistler principles. Canada had a meeting in Whistler, which is on the west coast in the mountains, where we shaped the G7 agenda on innovation. And some of the key features were about promoting inclusive innovation with the support on by focusing on the poorest and the most vulnerable. Investing in locally driven solutions as much as possible, and supporting local innovators, taking intelligent risks, putting ourselves out there, accepting that our taxpayers will allow us to try new things even if they fail. That's so important, right? As public servants, we're always so scared of failing because we think that the taxpayers are not going to be happy with us trying new things. But if it means that we develop better solutions in the end, then it's probably worth it. So those were some of the things that the Whistler Principles committed to on the part of the G7 nations. Now I want to get to what I hope will be the more concrete part of my presentation. And that's, so like, how are we doing this in a country like Colombia? So everyone on this in the audience will know better than I do about Colombia. But the way we're seeing it is that, you know, in summary, we've been a cooperation partner here for 40 years, as I mentioned before. Canada's invested more than $400 million in assistance over the last decade in international development. Right now, we have $300 million in investments that are active in international development. But, you know, in Colombia, despite the peace accord, there's still violence and conflict and insecurity. It's one of the most unequal countries in Latin America. Peace is fragile, we know that. Poverty levels remain high. And then on top of that, you've got the pressures, but also the opportunities of migration, but the challenge of the pandemic and the recovery. Yet you are a thriving, innovative, amazing middle-income country that is becoming a regional ally of Canada, and you're in the OECD, and you have private institutions that are robust and that want to make a difference in the lives of the most vulnerable. You have solid governance with governments that across regime changes are committed to making a difference for the most vulnerable. So these two sides of Colombia are a perfect place for a country like Canada to advance development assistance that achieves more impact for the most vulnerable with less of our precious official development assistance, our ODA, in a true partnership with all aspects of Colombian society, including the private sector. And this is connected to our wider interest to build a deep relationship with a country like Colombia so that we can be allies for decades to come. And so our vision as a program in terms of doing international cooperation in Colombia is kind of going from what we call development 1.0 to development 3.0. You know, we used to focus on traditional official development assistance grants. These developed fairly expensive solutions that were difficult to replicate. Oftentimes, we didn't really know if we achieved impact after we invested in our development assistance projects. We often did them in silos and they were all fragmented. We didn't partner really at all with the private sector and rarely even with the Colombian government. So we were really an external actor coming in, doing our own thing and focusing on paying for activities rather than results. Where we want to get to with our international cooperation in an amazing country like Colombia is to work with the private sector and the host governments as equal partners. We want to be making investments rather than donations. We want to be catalytic. We want to use our convening power to bring different actors together and play a facilitating role. We want to de-risk things where there's risks that we don't think should exist. And we want to support Colombia's innovation and experimentation culture, which this audience is all about today. But it's all about having more impact with the same resources. So let me talk to two examples now before I conclude. The first one is a project we launched a couple of years ago. It's called Agroemprende Cacao, and it's our first results-based financing project as a government that we've ever done anywhere in the world. And so it supports smallholder cacao producers in the most conflict-affected and vulnerable parts of Colombia so that they can form cooperatives, increase their crop productivity, and connect with buyers to get a better price for their product that create sustainable businesses. Our Canadian partner organization is Soko Devi, and it's an expert in supporting cooperatives in the farming sector. What's different about this project is that we as a government are paying up to $18 million Canadian, but only if independently verified results are achieved. For example, an increase in crop production or evidence showing that women have been more empowered as part of their cooperatives, or the number of cooperatives formed. But as partners, several Colombian and Canadian private sector companies have committed more than $20 million of upfront capital to pay for the activities, but also to join us in paying only if results are achieved. And because we pay only if results are achieved, but we let the partner do whatever they want to achieve those results, we actually incentivize them to develop cheaper, more affordable solutions to development challenges. So that was one example. The next generation of this outcomes-based approach to international cooperation that we're pursuing is something we're designing right now, and it's called the Outcome Fund for Education. This is going to be really cool. Over the past 2 years, we've formed an alliance, that is Canada, with 4 of Colombia's leading private sector company foundations. This includes Bancolombia, Sura, Nutresa, and Empresarios por la Educación. The alliance members, we all share the commitment and vision to support education for the most vulnerable, but we refuse to do things the way they've been done in the past. Through this alliance, we're co-creating the Outcome Fund for Education results, or the offer. We're doing it in close cooperation with the Ministry of Education, that is the Colombian government. We've hired an outside expert firm to help us design it. It's taken 2 years, but in the end, we hope to launch it next year. And what it will do is it'll create a marketplace for generating affordable solutions to strengthen the access to and quality of education for vulnerable populations. It'll focus on women and girls, migrants, rural populations, indigenous and conflict-affected populations. Canada is going to contribute quite a bit of money over the next 5 years to the fund. But our contributions will only pay if the education outcomes are achieved. Our private sector partners will also contribute to the fund. We expect it to be pretty big in terms of the amount of money. But it's a public-private partnership. So Canada and its private sector allies will launch this fund here in Colombia because you are a leading marketplace for pioneering results-based financing approaches to development challenges. You were the country, the first developing country, so to speak, where a social impact bond was launched. And we learned a lot from that. But this is the place to do these kinds of things. Colombia is a world leader for it. A little bit about how the offer will work and why it's different. So Canada and its private sector partners will put money into the fund. We're going to sign a contract with a fund manager to manage that fund. Canada and its private sector alliance partners, we're going to define together with the Colombian government what education outcomes we want to achieve for the most vulnerable. Then the fund manager is going to issue challenges or calls for proposal to the marketplace for service providers or firms to develop solutions to achieve the results. So they're going to compete for contracts to win contracts in this marketplace we're going to create. The service providers will receive a little bit of upfront capital from the private sector partners to develop the solutions. But after they've developed the solutions, an independent evaluator checks to see if it achieves the outcome, the impact we said we wanted to achieve. If they achieve it, then and only then does the fund pay the service provider for the results. So depending on the nature of the education gap that the fund wants to tackle, incentives are built into the challenges for service providers. For example, if a challenge asks a service provider to develop a solution to increase literacy in Choco, the fund may pay more if the solution achieves a result that is more sustainable, such as helping a more diverse or challenged population of kids, or is more affordable for the local and national governments to scale up. Also, the Alliance gets to demand the solutions to the toughest problems. We create the marketplace. So we can focus on an Afro-Colombian kid from a family affected by violence or conflict, or we can focus on a Venezuelan migrant population that wants to learn. So before I conclude, what's neat about this model, or what's different about this model and why it's relevant to innovation, is that the Colombian government ends up with more affordable and proven solutions that it can then afford to scale up. With this model, Canada uses its official development assistance in a catalytic way. We pay only for outcomes that achieve impact. The Colombian private sector partners take on more risk. So Colombia takes on more risk. Together, we strengthen the entire ecosystem for education solutions. By creating a marketplace for results-based financing, we strengthen the ecosystem. More diverse funding sources, stronger service providers, more affordable solutions, stronger evaluation of results, and then true government ownership. In fact, the intent of the Alliance is for the Colombian government to become a fund contributor within a few years. So we want the fund to live on as long as solutions are needed, with Canada fading out and Colombia stepping in. Throughout the process, we focus a lot on learning so that the model can be used elsewhere by Colombians and by others. That's part of innovation. I think our offer will deliver on expanding Canada's support for global education, but it's also based on the lessons we've learned from that cacao project I described. So to conclude on this part, we are, with these kinds of approaches, outcomes-based approaches where we're partnering with the private sector and the Colombian government, we are working on equal footing, I would say, to address development challenges. Canada is no longer a donor, we're a co-investor. So to conclude, as I said at the beginning, we're not going to achieve the SDGs unless we do things differently. And we're running out of time, to be frank. But I'm inspired by countries like Colombia that are willing to innovate and partner with Canada in different ways. We need to know what solution it is we are tackling. We need to partner more effectively and really make sure the partnerships are on equal footing. And we need to partner with partners that think like us, that have the same mindsets to want to do things differently to have more impact. And Colombia is the perfect place to implement a public innovation mandate when we think about international cooperation. In 5 years, success for me will be that Canada is partnering with Colombia truly on an equal footing to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. And I know we can get there if we continue to innovate together. Thank you so much for your time and attention. It was really a pleasure being with you today.
Muchísimas gracias a ti, Craig, por compartirnos esas experiencias, esos aprendizajes de cómo motivar la innovación pública, cómo seguir trabajando para ser más eficientes, más transparentes, más participativos. Es una experiencia, la verdad, muy enriquecedora para todos los que tuvimos la oportunidad de escucharte. Seguramente vamos a estar compartiendo información de este evento posteriormente, así que nuevamente mil gracias, Greg. Invito a todos los que nos están viendo en este momento a que tomemos un break, a que nos dirijamos al mundo virtual desde que hemos preparado para ustedes el día de hoy, para que también nos conectemos en la virtualidad y podamos seguir aprendiendo juntos y activando el interruptor. Muchas gracias.